Clara Bennett had always believed in the life she shared with Jason. 8 years of marriage, 2 children, and a comfortable home in the outskirts of Boston that everyone admired. To the outside world, their life was perfect. Friends often commented on how compatible they seemed, how supportive they were of each other, and how enviable their relationship appeared. Clara ran a small but thriving interior design studio, while Jason managed a growing tech company. They had built their life together from scratch, brick by brick, dream by dream. But recently, something had changed. It started subtly. Jason began taking phone calls in private, often disappearing for long stretches during the day or in the evening without explanation. Messages would vanish from his phone when Clara's eyes accidentally wandered toward it. He became defensive over minor questions and unusually vague about his plans. At first, Clara tried to dismiss it. Perhaps he was just stressed, tired, or overworked. She told herself not to overthink things, not to let insecurity cloud her judgment. But her intuition, honed over years of trusting her instincts, whispered that something was amiss. One Friday evening, while Clara prepared for a charity gala hosted by a local foundation, she noticed Jason seemed distracted. He kept checking his phone and paced the living room more than usual. "Everything okay?" she asked softly, adjusting her earrings. Jason's smile appeared forced, like a mask. "I'm fine," he replied. "Just some work stuff." Clara wanted to believe him, but there was a hollowness in his eyes she recognized instantly. That night, she struggled to sleep. Her mind replayed recent events, the missed dinners, the late-night excuses, the little white lies she had brushed aside. Something was undeniably wrong. The next morning, Jason mentioned a brunch meeting with a colleague, someone he said he had to see about an urgent business matter. Clara asked casually if she could join, pretending not to care too much. Jason hesitated before replying, "No, it's just a small meeting. Nothing for you to worry about." That hesitation was all the confirmation Clara needed. She couldn't ignore her suspicion any longer. She would follow him, quietly and carefully, to discover the truth for herself. Clara parked a few blocks away and trailed Jason as he drove downtown. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from a mix of anxiety and determination. She needed to know who he was meeting and why he had kept it from her. The city was alive with weekend energy. Streets buzzed with people walking dogs, carrying shopping bags, sipping coffee, and enjoying the crisp spring air. Her mind spun scenarios, but deep down she already knew what she might find. Jason arrived at a cozy, upscale cafe that Clara had never noticed before. She parked across the street, pretending to scroll through her phone while observing. Jason entered, and moments later a woman approached him. She was striking, tall, with long dark hair, dressed elegantly, exuding confidence and charm. The way Jason greeted her, the subtle intimacy in his gestures, immediately told Clara that this was not a casual work meeting. He laughed at something she said, leaning closer than anyone should with a mere colleague. Clara's stomach twisted, a pang of betrayal and hurt. She felt her hands tremble slightly as she tried to calm herself. For a moment, she considered marching in and confronting him, but she realized that would only provoke chaos without clarity. She needed the full truth to witness every detail. So she quietly moved to a nearby table, pretending to sip her coffee while observing. Every gesture, every glance, every whisper was etched in her mind. As she watched, memories of their years together flooded her thoughts. The late-night talks, the shared dreams, the vacations, the cozy nights in the living room laughing and sharing stories. All of it now felt tainted. How could he betray her trust after everything? The ache in her chest was sharp, a combination of heartbreak and anger. Yet, amid the storm of emotions, a strange clarity emerged. He thought I wouldn't notice. He underestimated me. Clara focused on the scene in front of her. Jason and the woman, Vanessa, seemed completely at ease, laughing, talking intimately, oblivious to anyone else. She observed the way Jason touched her arm lightly, the way their eyes met in secretive glances, the subtle intimacy that should never have existed in her marriage. Each small detail sharpened Clara's resolve. She wasn't just a wife discovering betrayal. She was a woman fully awake to the truth, and now she would craft her response carefully. The cafe around her seemed to fade. The hum of conversations, the clinking of cups, the soft background music, all became mere whispers against the storm in her mind. Her emotions oscillated wildly between sorrow and rage, disbelief and determination. She thought about the time she had supported him, celebrated his achievements, forgiven minor mistakes, and loved him unconditionally. And now this. He had chosen deception over honesty. Yet Clara's mind was already plotting. She would not confront him rashly. She would not allow her emotions to dictate the first move. There would be a plan, a precise, calculated approach to reveal the truth in a way that left no doubt. She would reclaim her dignity, assert her strength, and make Jason understand the magnitude of his betrayal. For hours, she remained at the next table, silent, observing every nuance of their interaction. The cafe had become a theater, the scene before her the centerpiece of her revelation. Every laugh, every gesture, every whispered word became a mental note, building a blueprint for what was to come. She imagined conversations, the timing, the perfect opportunity to reveal everything. Her mind was sharp, methodical, and unwavering. When Jason and Vanessa finally left the cafe, Clara sat for a moment longer, letting the shock and anger simmer beneath a calm exterior. She knew that the moment to act had not yet come. Patience, she reminded herself, was crucial. She had already witnessed the betrayal. Now she would craft the exposure with meticulous care. Driving home, her thoughts raced. She replayed the scene, analyzing every movement, every tone, every flicker of emotion. Everything made sense now. The missed dinners, the late-night calls, the disappearing messages, all threads of a story she now fully understood. By the evening, Clara had outlined her plan. It would require patience, strategy, and a cold focus that was unusual even for her. She would wait for the perfect moment to confront Jason, to reveal his actions in a way that left no room for denial, no space for excuses. The revelation would be undeniable, precise, and unforgettable. And as she prepared dinner with a calm exterior, beneath it was a fire, fueled by betrayal, sharpened by determination, and guided by intelligence. Clara Bennett had discovered Jason's secret, and she was ready. The storm was coming, but it would be on her terms. He thought she would never find out. He thought she would remain unaware, but he had underestimated her. And when the truth was revealed, it would change everything. Clara Bennett sat in the quiet of her home after the events at the cafe, the memory of Jason and Vanessa's laughter lingering like a bitter taste in her mouth. She had spent years believing in the foundation of their marriage, and now that foundation had been shaken to its core. Yet, amid the hurt and disbelief, a plan began to form, a precise, calculated response that would ensure Jason understood the full weight of his betrayal. This was not going to be a rash confrontation. This was going to be strategy, timing, and justice executed with meticulous care. For the next few days, Clara immersed herself in careful observation. She paid attention to Jason's routines, the subtle clues in his behavior, and the small details that revealed the depth of his duplicity. She learned which cafes he frequented, the restaurants he preferred for secret meetings, and even the small gestures Vanessa displayed when she thought no one was watching. Clara's mind worked like a chessboard, each piece placed with intent, every move calculated to ensure maximum effect. Her first priority was information. She needed concrete proof, evidence that would leave Jason no room for denial. Clara began documenting everything. She noted dates, times, locations, and patterns in Jason's movements. Every photograph she took, every conversation she overheard, was another piece of the puzzle. Her hands moved with precision as she typed notes into her private journal, detailing even the smallest behavioral cues that spoke volumes. While the outside world remained oblivious to the storm brewing in her life, Clara's emotional state was a mixture of cold determination and simmering rage. She replayed the cafe scene repeatedly in her mind. The way Jason leaned in close to Vanessa, the subtle brush of his hand against hers, the ease with which he lied to her face. These memories fueled her plan, sharpening her focus and fortifying her resolve. She realized that for the revenge to be effective, it had to be layered, subtle at first, then undeniable, leaving a trail of humiliation and clarity that Jason could not escape. Clara's first step involved psychological maneuvering. She began to subtly observe Jason in their home, noticing how he interacted with her in casual conversation, how he avoided certain topics, and how Vanessa's presence had already begun to influence his behavior. Clara discovered that Jason had become so confident in his deception that he underestimated the intelligence and patience of the woman he had betrayed. This overconfidence would work in her favor. She decided to exploit it, creating scenarios that would allow her to expose him gradually, first to herself, then to those around him, maximizing both the emotional impact and the strategic advantage. In order to execute her plan, Clara knew she needed allies, but carefully chosen ones. She confided in no one initially, fearing leaks or premature action. Instead, she built a network of subtle observation. She hired a private investigator under the guise of a security review for their home, a professional whose presence Jason would never question. This investigator would track Jason discreetly, document his interactions, and report back with exact times, locations, and photographic evidence. Clara felt a thrill of satisfaction knowing that she was taking control of a situation that had threatened to spiral beyond her influence. Simultaneously, Clara worked on a personal transformation that would amplify her leverage. She updated her wardrobe, changed her hairstyle subtly, and adopted a demeanor that exuded confidence and unshakable composure. Every movement, every glance, every word was calibrated to show Jason that she was not a woman to be deceived lightly. Clara wanted him to feel, in the smallest interactions, the shifting balance of power. Days turned into a week, and Clara accumulated an undeniable cache of evidence. Photographs, receipts, witness accounts, and subtle observations, all meticulously recorded, built a narrative that was indisputable. She had every detail she needed: the time of each meeting, the locations, the patterns of Jason's deception. She even learned about Vanessa's routines, the cafes she preferred, the restaurants she frequented, and the subtle signals she used to communicate with Jason. Clara's plan was approaching completion, and the first phase of her revenge was ready to unfold. Clara decided to test Jason's confidence before launching her full plan. She orchestrated a casual conversation, pretending ignorance of his recent behavior while probing for clues. Jason, unaware that Clara already knew everything, spoke freely about minor interactions with Vanessa, giving away details he thought she could never confirm. Clara listened carefully, responding with calm neutrality, absorbing every word, storing every inflection. The moment was empowering. Jason's overconfidence had become his weakness, and Clara intended to exploit it fully. The first tactical move involved a calculated public exposure. Clara arranged for a seemingly casual brunch with friends at the same cafe where she had first discovered Jason's betrayal. The setting was perfect, familiar, crowded enough to ensure visibility, yet intimate enough to observe without interference. Clara arrived early, her appearance striking but understated, her demeanor confident and composed. She positioned herself strategically, ensuring that she could observe Jason without drawing attention. Jason arrived with Vanessa, completely unaware that Clara was present. The moment he spotted her, a flicker of recognition passed across his face, quickly masked by charm and composure. Clara allowed a subtle smile to play on her lips, a smile that Jason could not interpret fully, but that carried a weight of meaning he could not yet grasp. She sat at a nearby table, pretending to check emails on her phone, but her eyes never left them. Every movement, every gesture was deliberate. As Jason and Vanessa settled into their conversation, Clara's heart pounded with anticipation. She sipped her coffee calmly, maintaining an aura of casual observation, while mentally rehearsing the sequence of actions that would ensure the maximum psychological impact. She knew that the exposure needed to be gradual yet undeniable, a slow revelation that would strip away Jason's confidence piece by piece. Clara's phone buzzed with a message she had prearranged with the private investigator, confirmed. Vanessa and Jason meeting at 11:15. Photos captured. Behavior documented. All details ready. Clara felt a surge of satisfaction. The evidence was complete, precise, and irrefutable. She allowed herself a small moment of triumph before returning her focus to the unfolding scene. Over the next several minutes, Clara's plan moved from observation to subtle disruption. She ensured that their waitress, unaware of the larger context, served Jason and Vanessa in a manner that drew attention to their conversation. Clara made small, strategic comments to friends within hearing distance, all designed to suggest that she was fully aware of deceit and infidelity without revealing the source. The psychological effect on Jason was gradual yet effective. The creeping awareness that he might be seen, that his secret was no longer secure, began to unsettle him. Clara maintained her composure, but internally, she noted every detail of Jason's reaction. The slight tightening of his jaw, the subtle hesitation in his speech, the quick glances toward her table. All were indicators that her plan was working. She allowed him to continue, feeding his overconfidence, all the while knowing that the next phase of her revenge would be unavoidable, undeniable, and meticulously timed. That evening, Clara returned home and reviewed the collected evidence. She organized photographs, receipts, and detailed notes into a coherent timeline, creating a record that would not only prove the betrayal but also demonstrate the depth of planning and observation she had undertaken. Each document, each photo, each note was a piece of the puzzle she would use to orchestrate the ultimate revelation. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she confront him directly? Should she expose him to friends and family first? Or should she allow the psychological tension to build, letting him realize gradually the futility of his deceit before delivering the final blow? Clara decided on the latter. Patience, she knew, would magnify the impact, ensuring that every step of her plan left an indelible mark on Jason's psyche. In the following days, Clara executed small, strategic maneuvers to test Jason's reactions. She asked casual questions about his schedule, mentioned places she thought he might have been, and observed his responses closely. Every lie he told, every hesitation, every attempt to deflect suspicion fed the growing network of evidence she had already begun to compile. Her transformation, both internal and external, became apparent. Jason began to notice subtle changes in Clara, the confidence in her posture, the calm decisiveness in her voice, the calculated patience in her actions. He did not yet understand the full scope of her awareness, but the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. Clara's presence became a psychological mirror, reflecting his deceit back at him in ways he could sense but not fully comprehend. Finally, Clara began to orchestrate the next phase of her plan, controlled public exposure. She arranged for a series of casual, coincidental meetings with Vanessa in places Jason frequented, ensuring that the encounters were noticed by mutual acquaintances. Each event was carefully timed and executed to maximize visibility while maintaining plausible deniability. Clara's objective was clear. Jason needed to feel the inevitable collapse of his carefully constructed facade, piece by piece, without knowing exactly when or how the culmination would occur. By the end of the second week, Clara's strategy was in full motion. She had created a lattice of observation, evidence, and subtle psychological pressure that left Jason increasingly uneasy, though he still underestimated her. Clara, however, remained calm, composed, and confident. She had transformed the initial shock of betrayal into a powerful tool, turning the emotional turmoil into precision, patience, and calculated action. The final revelation was approaching, and when it arrived, it would be a force that could not be ignored, denied, or deflected. Clara Bennett, betrayed but unbroken, had become a strategist of emotional justice. Her patience, intelligence, and resolve ensured that the ultimate moment of revenge would not only reveal Jason's infidelity, but also reassert her strength, dignity, and control over a situation that had threatened to undermine her life. The chessboard was set, every piece in place, and the endgame was near. Clara sat in her car outside the quaint little cafe, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. She could see Jason through the window, laughing with Vanessa, his hand brushing hers ever so casually. Every detail of the scene was etched into her mind, and she felt an unusual mixture of anger, hurt, and determination rising inside her. This was the moment she had been preparing for, not just to confront Jason, but to reclaim her own dignity and take back the power he thought he had over her. She remembered the countless nights she had spent replaying the betrayal in her head, wondering how she had been so blind for so long. The way he had looked at Vanessa, the whispers, the secret messages, Clara had uncovered all of it, piece by piece. Each revelation had fueled her resolve. Today, she wasn't just confronting a cheating husband. She was confronting a man who had underestimated her entirely. Clara took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, her heels clicking softly on the pavement as she entered the cafe. Jason didn't notice her at first, too busy leaning in toward Vanessa, his laughter echoing in the warm, bustling atmosphere. Clara's presence, though, drew a sudden sharp intake of breath from him. Vanessa froze mid-laugh, her eyes widening in recognition of the woman standing in front of them, calm yet radiating a quiet storm. "Clara!" Jason stammered, his confident composure cracking for the first time that day. I didn't expect you here." Clara's lips curved into a controlled, almost serene smile. "Of course you didn't," she said, her voice measured, every syllable deliberate. "Because you thought I would never find out. You thought I would never come here, sit at the next table, and see everything with my own eyes." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her usual confidence failing her under Clara's unwavering gaze. "Clara, she began, but Clara raised a finger, signaling her to stop. "No, Vanessa, don't. This isn't about you," Clara said softly, but her words carried the weight of iron. "This is about Jason and the choices he made. And you need to understand something. He doesn't get to disrespect me, our marriage, and our life together without consequences." Jason opened his mouth, trying to formulate some excuse, some smooth lie that might undo the damage, but Clara had already anticipated his words. She had rehearsed this confrontation in her mind countless times, preparing for every weak attempt he could make to regain control of the situation. "Jason," she continued, her voice steady, "do you remember the promises you made when we got married? Do you remember the vows about honesty, loyalty, and love? Because I remember them vividly. And I also remember that those vows are not optional. They are not subject to negotiation when it suits you." He looked down, guilt flickering across his face, though he tried to hide it. Vanessa, meanwhile, looked increasingly uneasy, realizing that the charming facade Jason had maintained for months was crumbling under Clara's presence. Clara walked slowly toward their table, every step deliberate. She had a plan, not one born of revenge in the petty sense, but one rooted in truth, exposure, and the undeniable power of clarity. Today, Jason would see that the woman he had underestimated was not just hurt, but unstoppable. "Clara, please," Jason pleaded, voice tight with panic. "Let's talk." "No, Jason," Clara interrupted, her gaze cutting through him like a knife. "There's nothing to talk about anymore. The truth is already visible. Everyone can see it. And I want you to understand, deeply, what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you claim to love." At that moment, Clara reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She tapped a few buttons, and the screen illuminated with a series of text messages, photos, and emails, all the undeniable proof of Jason's infidelity. She held it up for both Jason and Vanessa to see. Vanessa's face drained of color as she read the messages. She looked from the phone to Jason, disbelief and fear mingling in her expression. I didn't know, she whispered, almost defensively. Clara's eyes remained fixed on Jason. Don't you dare lie to me. You thought this was a secret. You thought I wouldn't find out. And now, Jason, the moment has arrived when you must face the reality of your actions. Jason's head dropped, shame evident in every line of his posture. Clara could see the desperation in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed deception had unraveled completely. I never meant to hurt you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just what? Clara asked softly, though her tone carried an edge of steel. Just what, Jason? Just forget our vows? Just disregard everything we built together? Just think that your momentary desire could erase the years of trust we shared? He swallowed hard, knowing there was no excuse. Clara continued, her voice unwavering. I want you to understand that this isn't just about anger or revenge. This is about accountability. You made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences. At that moment, Clara's phone buzzed again. She checked it and smiled faintly. She had already set in motion the next step of her plan. A few minutes later, the cafe manager approached, curious about the tension at the table. Clara invited him over and calmly asked for the security footage from the past month, the exact days she knew Jason and Vanessa had been meeting secretly. The manager agreed, sensing the seriousness in her demeanor. Jason watched in growing panic as Clara expertly demonstrated the timeline of his betrayal. She pointed out specific dates, times, and encounters, using the cafe's records to validate her meticulous research. Vanessa's attempts to interject were futile. Clara's composure left no room for denial. You see, Jason, Clara said, her voice soft but cutting, I have lived with the uncertainty, the questions, the sleepless nights. But now you can see the truth for yourself. I want everyone here to understand the reality of what you thought you could hide. The cafe, now partially aware of the situation, created a small crowd of patrons who watched quietly, sensing the intensity of the confrontation. Clara remained calm, almost regal in her demeanor, a stark contrast to Jason's crumbling composure. Then she leaned closer, her eyes locking onto his. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I would accept betrayal quietly. But I am not that person, Jason. I am someone who values herself, her dignity, and her life enough not to let anyone trample over it. Jason tried to reach for her hand, a desperate plea for forgiveness, but Clara stepped back. Don't touch me. Not now. Not ever again unless your actions prove that you are worthy of the trust you shattered. Clara turned to Vanessa. And you? I hope this teaches you something about boundaries, respect, and integrity. Your actions do not define me, but they do define the choices you make in your own life. Vanessa nodded, shame evident, and for the first time, Clara saw genuine regret in her eyes. She had orchestrated this confrontation not just to expose Jason, but also to allow Vanessa to confront her own complicity. Clara then turned to the small crowd of cafe patrons. What you witnessed here is a story of betrayal, discovery, and the strength it takes to reclaim one's life. Remember this. Never underestimate the resilience of a person who has been wronged, because their power grows exponentially when fueled by truth and self-respect. The crowd murmured softly, some nodding in quiet admiration. Clara then collected her things, her movements calm and purposeful. She gave Jason one final look, a mixture of sorrow, disappointment, and unwavering resolve. You will live with your choices, Jason. I will live with mine. And from this moment on, my life is mine to reclaim, untainted by your betrayal. With that, Clara walked out of the cafe, the sunlight hitting her face as she took her first deep breath of liberation. The air felt fresher, the world brighter. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger, unbroken, and unapologetically herself. Jason remained seated, stunned and speechless, the weight of his decisions crashing down on him. Vanessa quietly slipped out behind Clara, leaving both men and women to reflect on the undeniable power of truth. Clara stepped into her car, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She didn't need revenge in the conventional sense. She didn't need to humiliate, yell, or strike. She had used the most potent tool of all: clarity, evidence, and courage. She had reclaimed herself. Driving away, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had endured betrayal, pain, and doubt, but she had emerged victorious in the only way that truly mattered, by remaining true to herself, unwavering and unafraid. From that day forward, Jason's attempts to justify himself would ring hollow, and Vanessa's fleeting presence in their lives would be nothing more than a lesson. Clara had not just survived betrayal. She had transformed it into a testament of strength, resilience, and empowerment. The story of that afternoon, the cafe, the confrontation, the undeniable exposure, would remain etched in Clara's memory forever. It was a turning point, a chapter that closed one painful part of her life and opened a new one filled with self-respect, independence, and the knowledge that no one could ever diminish her worth again. Clara smiled softly, her eyes gleaming with a mix of relief and triumph. Life was waiting, vast and full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace it fully. Betrayal had come, but it would not define her. She would write her own story on her own terms, and it would be one of strength, dignity, and undeniable power.